if you're spending more than, let's say, 4 hours a week in the gym, you are wasting time you could be spending with friends, family, other interests, other career choices, etc. So while it is extremely interesting and is an amazing hobby, it is addictive, and it is ego-driven narcissism a lot of the time. And you need to realize you can get really, really good results training 3 times a week for an hour. You can get exceptional results with more, but you can get really, really good results with just that amount of time. You have to always step back and kind of think about why you're doing this, right? So it's just like any other craft, is the amount of time you spend into it has to be used efficiently. And always remember, time you are investing into it is time you could have been investing in other things that may last longer than your body.
You're listening to Inside Acting, a podcast dedicated to demystifying the inner and outer game of success in the entertainment industry. I'm Trevor Algott.
And I'm AJ Meyer, and in episode 308, we bring you the third and final part of Trev's conversation with the godfather of the modern intermittent fasting movement, nutrition and sports science writer Brad Pilon. In part 3, Brad chats specifically about how much protein our bodies really need and also use, and what the science says about how to get the most gains, with a Z, from your workouts. It's another deep dive, and we think you'll find it truly enlightening. Episode 38 coming at you. Stay with us.
Support for this episode of Inside Acting is brought to you in part by Rehearsal Pro, the current version of Rehearsal, the essential app for actors, which is now available in the iOS App Store. If you want to learn your lines, be off book for your auditions, explore your character, make stronger and bolder choices, and do a bunch more, go to rehearsal.pro/IAP right now, where you can learn all about the great, really useful, and really valuable new features in this newest version of Rehearsal, the groundbreaking app designed by actors for actors that will help you book the office every single time. That's rehearsal.pro/IAP.
Good morrow, Sir Trevor of the Algats.
Morning, my friend. How are you doing over there in your part of town?
In my part of town. Good. Things are starting to heat up.
Yeah, it's getting hot out.
Yeah, and we don't have AC in our building, so spring and summertime are always always an interesting exercise in trying not to overheat. But hopefully I'll be able to get out of town a little bit here and there, get some altitude. That's what I always love doing.
Yeah, you were just recently out of town. Again.
Yeah, again. And goodbye. We did a performance, a JWT performance in Palm Desert, and I used it as an great excuse to go to Joshua Tree National Park, which I have spent time in before, but never backpacking. And I did like a quick overnight in the southern half of the park, which is sort of the less traveled or less busy, less touristy side of the national park. All the Joshua trees themselves and a lot of the big rocks and stuff are in the northern half of the park, so that's where most of the traffic happens. So not only was there not a lot of traffic, but there was 0 people on the trail, not a single person. From the time I left the trailhead to the time I got back to the trailhead, I saw no other humans.
Wow. How long were you there?
Just like less than 24 hours. I mean, because I wasn't able to, because we had another show the morning before, I wasn't able to get on the trail until like 4 o'clock. So only had about 3 hours of daylight. And so I took my time, and I probably only did about 4 miles in and 4 miles out, something like that. So, and we had the performance the next day as well. So I had about the same amount of hiking time the night before and the next morning. So like less than 24 hours.
So you were up in that area for a performance, and then in between the first performance and the second performance, you drove to Joshua Tree, did a 4-mile hike in each direction, or 4 miles-ish in each direction, slept in the park, and then went back and did another show?
Yeah.
All by yourself?
Yeah.
Badass.
The first show was actually in LA. That's why I didn't get on the trail until late. So the first one I drove from LA to Joshua Tree and then got on the trail, and that's why it was so late in the afternoon. But it was gorgeous, and I can't wait to go back and explore some other areas of the park.
That's good to know too, that the south part of the park is largely tourist free, camper free, hiker free. So if you're looking for a little more solitude, there you go, people. There's a great sort of part of the park here in SoCal to check out.
Yeah, a little Southern California pro tip: enter from the Cottonwood Springs side of the park, the southern entrance.
Okay. That's good to know. I actually might be going up there in a few weeks with my brother for our semi-annual Joshua Tree camping trip for my birthday. So I will keep that in mind.
Do it, man. That would be a great... I mean, it's beautiful there right now. Like, the weather is just perfect.
Yeah.
It's like 80-something during the day and 50 at night or something like that. I sort of slept without a sleeping bag or a quilt. Like, I didn't have anything on me. It was amazing.
That's so cool, man. Right on. So this is all prep for sort of larger, longer, upcoming hikes and excursions in the wilderness for you.
Yeah, as often and as much as I can trail, I am. I don't know if she wants me to talk about this, actually. Jasmine has a really cool opportunity coming up in late summer that will take her out of town for a little over a week. And I want her to have her own experience. So I'm just going to use it as an excuse to go on my own excursion somewhere. And so I'm thinking about, this is gonna be like late August, early September. And I'm trying to figure out like where I want to go, what trail I want to do, et cetera. So I'm thinking maybe like either the High Sierra Trail or a big loop in going back to like Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Park, which is where we went last August. Obviously, tons of options. California is like just such a beautiful landscape, and there are so many things that are within easy striking distance of Los Angeles, 3 hours, 4 hours drive of LA. So not sure exactly where, but I know something it's coming for sure.
That's great. So I'm going to ask you this question just totally off the cuff before we move on.
One of those, the Trevor.
How has your vision for your life evolved over the years? Because, and I guess I'm asking this question because I know for me, it used to be very much like, I want to be in the city. I want to be around where things are happening. I want to be very plugged in. To a cabin in the woods by the lake sounds great. And I'm increasingly kind of like, I don't think I want to be around people like, these dense metropolis areas as much as I did before. I see myself more as like a cabin by the lake kind of guy. And I'm curious if that is sort of something that if this sort of, I know you've always been camping and always been very into, hiking and the wilderness and nature, but you're doing a lot more of it now than you used to. And I'm wondering if your vision for your future has changed.
Yeah, it's a great question, actually. And it is definitely affecting my interest and call to nature has definitely shifted some things and affected my overall vision for my life. I don't know, where things are going to lead me. I'm just sort of like following my passions right now. Acting is still very much a part of who I am. And I, like you, like we talked about, what was it, like a month or two ago about, if you were to book a series regular and made $70,000 an episode and like had a really awesome job for a long time, like would that, be a lifestyle you could get used to? Like, of course. And I'm still pursuing it and still doing, I wouldn't say the bare minimum, but I'm doing enough to kind of keep my acting career lively. but I shared with Jasmine something very personal just last night, actually, after listening to that podcast that you recommended, Trevor, the interview with on the Rich Roll podcast with Jared. What's his last name? Jared, the guy from the EPA.
Oh, yeah. Jared Blumenthal.
Yeah. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be one of those people who goes on one of these big, long, epic 4, 5, 6 month through hikes and then just ruins their life because they can't come back to, as you said, like a bustling metropolitan area. And so I kind of shared that with Jasmine. And I was like, I hope you're okay with going and living in a cabin in the woods by a lake kind of thing. Like, we may need to go somewhere that's not here so that I have an easier time sort of reintegrating.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember last year when Jasmine went to her 10-day Vipassana silent meditation retreat, but one of the people that she met there was this woman who signed up for it because she had done the PCT and was having a really hard time reintegrating, having so much solitude and time to kind of hash things out. I feel like it could potentially change. I mean, it has to change one's life if you make the choice to do that, of course. But the way in which I think it might affect my life is it could potentially lead me in the direction that you're talking about, which is like a cabin in a lake by the, a cabin in the woods by a lake. I feel like that's another reason why the whole hashtag van life thing has been so appealing, is the simplification of one's life. Like Jared said in the interview, there was something very gratifying about the fact, like, it made him so happy that everything he could ever need was sitting in a backpack on his back.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, everything I could ever need could be in a van, with like a bed and somewhere to cook, and like, that's it. What else do I really need? And so, it's been this really weird experience, like looking around my own, modest home. We live in a 1-bedroom. It's not that much bigger than, it's huge by New York standards, but, looking around at all of my stuff too. And we've purged multiple times. We've done the whole Marie Kondo thing. And I'm just like, do I really need this stuff? Like, why are there so many notebooks in here? That kind of stuff. So it's an interesting question, and damn, it's a deep rabbit hole. Like, we could spend hours just talking about this. This could be a whole other podcast called, the minimalist mountain man, living in the woods kind of, podcast, in which case it wouldn't be a podcast at all, because the whole idea of having a podcast, I'm sitting in front of this microphone with this, 15-inch computer and blah, blah, blah. Like, even the creation of this piece of media isn't necessarily minimalistic. So anyway, it's, something is happening, and I just get to acknowledge that and kind of figure it out. Work has been hard too, on the same note. Like, going into something that is so stimulating on so many different levels with so many different people. And I'm like, yeah, I've been having a hard time there too.
I remember I used to do those annual trips to Vermont, to Lake Champlain with my family. We don't do those anymore for various reasons, but we would go for 2.5 weeks or so, and it was great. We had these old cabins, for people who don't know, which would be everybody except you, AJ. They were these old, like 100-plus-year-old cabins on this strip of land right on the shores of Lake Champlain, on a tiny island called Grand Isle in Lake Champlain, in Vermont. And we would take off our watches, and we would just exist as a family, as a group of people. We would just exist and wake up when we were done sleeping, and eat when we were hungry, and go to bed when we were tired. And it was just so great. It was so quiet. The only soundtrack was really like the sound of like the lake. Occasionally we'd go into town and get food and stuff, but these are tiny little, towns. And I remember one year coming back from like 2.5 weeks of that and jumping back into my job at Apple, where I was working with you at the time, and needing like 3 days to reacclimate, because the world we live in is so incredibly noisy and busy and completely just nuts when you realize like what the alternative can be. And I think about this a lot. I think about what is the ideal environment for humans, like what is going to nurture our spirit in the deepest way. And I increasingly come down on the side of, Vermont, Lake Champlain, like just removing stimulus from our lives as much as possible. And it reminds me of a story that I read in one of Tom Hartman's books. I think it was The Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight. He talks about, the Europeans coming over from Spain to conquer the Americas and encountering the natives and all that. And there was a lot of warring and stuff going on, and the natives obviously lost that battle very quickly, in large part due to disease and not having the necessary immunity. But a big part of that was occasionally they would swap prisoners. So, they'd have these skirmishes, and some Europeans would be taken prisoners by the natives and vice versa. And I think it was this book. It might have been another book, but I remember him talking, or somebody talking about how when it came time to sort of retrieve your prisoners from the other person's party, none of the Europeans wanted to go back to the European side. They wanted to stay with the natives. They were so like nurtured and nourished by this closer to nature lifestyle that they didn't want to leave. So they would actually beg to stay as prisoners of the natives. And it wasn't the same from what I understand from the native side. So I read this in a book somewhere that I can't even remember. So if somebody knows more about this and would like to share more detail, I'd love to hear it. I hope I'm not misremembering that, but I find that to be a really romantic, but also for me at least, very true notion that, you know what, I think we live in a really hyper-stimulated world, and I don't think it's terribly natural or good for human beings to constantly be exposed to that. And the older I get, the more the more quickly I'm worn out by all the craziness that we have in our society, and I really opt for those long stretches of silent time. Sometimes, if it just needs to be in my apartment, like great, I just need that time to recharge, and I think that's fairly normal for human beings to need that kind of thing. And when we numb ourselves out from that by constantly being plugged in, which is so easy these days, I just wonder, are we harming ourselves in some intellectually, emotionally, spiritual way that's less easy to identify than, a broken arm or a broken leg?
That's some crazy historical context,
isn't it? And I remember in this book there was like a sketch that accompanied the story about this, and it was a sketch that some European settler drew of like the prisoner like clawing onto, like on his knees, like clawing onto the natives as the two parties are standing there trying to swap prisoners. The European was like, please don't take me back, I want to stay. It's really pretty nuts when you think about it. And I think the older people get, the saying is that the older you get, the more you appreciate nature and the arts. And I find that to be very true. And I wonder if that's sort of our true, disposition as human beings to connect with these things which are so timeless. And, the latest piece of technology is great, and technology has done wonderful things for our lives, but it's so fleeting. And it's so busy, it's so stimulating. Maybe what we're really programmed for and designed for and calibrated for is the simplest stuff that's been around forever, which is, just lots of immersion with the animals and the trees and the environment and the water, the air, and, storytelling. Simple storytelling with other human beings, preferably in person.
Well, now you got my gears turning as to how to combine those things.
Shakespeare in Joshua Tree. There it is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've auditioned for them only once, but I have always loved the idea of going up to Ashland and working for O'Shakes for a season, because you are in that sort of environment and getting to perform some amazing theater. So yeah. There is that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, like I said, deep rabbit hole, and we don't necessarily have time on this episode, but it's an ongoing conversation that I would love to keep having with you and with anyone else. If anyone else is feeling similarly, feel free to reach out to one or both of us or the podcast.
I would love to hear from our listeners on this, especially because it is, in my experience, simply a product of getting older. It seems to be universal, a universal feeling, more or less, among people who are, in our sort of age demographic or bracket. Like, we're starting to sort of gravitate towards being old people, and it's really nice. It's really rich. But when I was in my 20s, man, if you had told me I would say these things, I would be like, what? What? And I find myself increasingly able to identify this schism, as it were, between that younger version of myself, and I see it in other people, and then the older version of myself, which I also see in people. But interesting, right? It's interesting stuff. So we want to give a quick shout out, thank you to Ann Bell, who joined us with a yearly gift to help keep the Inside Acting podcast episodes online for all to enjoy. Thank you so much, Ann, for your gift. We really, really, really appreciate it. And of course, we want to make sure we give some love to vo2gogo.com. You want to take this one, AJ?
Yeah. What is VO2GoGo? Is that the award-winning voiceover training system and winner of Backstage's Reader's Choice Award for Best VO training 4 years in a row? Yes, that's right. That's that thing. Visit vo2gogo.com/start for a free getting started in voiceover online class that'll help you add voiceover to your acting portfolio. That's vo2gogo.com/start.
It is good stuff. Good stuff if you're looking to diversify your acting portfolio and income. I am biased, obviously, but check it out. vo2gogo.com/start. I think that's all the time we have before we jump into this third part of our chat with Brad. Anything you wanted to add before we boogie in?
No, sir. I'm really excited to hear this.
I said boogie in. Boogie in.
We boogie in. Boogie into his inner.
Yeah, we're going to boogie in. There you go, everybody. That's a weird visual. But enjoy this third part of my conversation with Brad, who is probably one of my favorite guests and favorite people. I just found him to be so approachable, so accessible, so real, and his work, if you haven't read his books, is very, very thorough. It's hard to argue with the mass of research that this guy has done on these different topics. So in part 3 today, we talk specifically about protein, which I know everybody's wondering about. Everybody wants to know how much protein we should be eating. And we had some interesting conversation about this because I eat a lot less protein than he recommends, and I'm doing fine. So we talk a little bit about how the body uses and adapts to protein intake, as well as a few different kinds of protein that you can be consuming. And then we also talk about periodization and how to really optimize your workout to get the most gains in the least amount of time. And of course, it's all lots of sciencey, research, nerdy stuff, which is right up my alley. So I hope you guys enjoy it too. And we'll catch you on the other side. Book a while ago by a guy named Dr. Garth Davis, and he wrote a book called Proteinaholic, and that sort of got me thinking about the whole protein thing. And then I haven't read your book incomplete yet, How Much Protein, mostly, to be honest, because I'm convinced now that it's really a non-issue. That our obsession with protein is almost like just a big distraction from just eat high quality foods. But could you sum up maybe how much protein, and then also maybe a little bit of your philosophy with Pilon's progressions?
Okay, so how much protein is really fun. How much protein basically, I'll give it away for everybody. It's roughly 90 to 150 grams of protein a day for muscle building. 90
to 150?
I 120, and the only reason I allowed up to 150 is I occasionally get the 6'6" or 8" guy emailing me like, "What about me?" I'm like, "Well,
All right, fine.
I'm 5'10", screw you. What about you stole 2 inches from me? That's what you But, yeah, so 90 to 120 for just about everybody, but I give that caveat of like, if you're a 5'1" woman, maybe 70. If you're a 6'8" guy, okay, fine, 150. But like, let's be realistic here. And what I've found is that the amazing human body that we've talked about for almost this entire thing habitualizes to an intake of protein, right? So if you consistently eat 65 grams of protein and you look the way you do, it's because your body has learned a balance of breakdown and buildup with 65 grams. If you increase from 65 while working out, let's say you jump up to 120, you're going to see some growth. And then your body's going to get used to 120 because that's just your new number that maintains you. And then let's say you jump from there to 240. Well, the same thing is going to happen. And then 300, like your body keeps getting used to an amount, and then you just keep drive it up with more protein. It just becomes a constantly upward swing. So the amount, like it's funny, I'm going to word it this way. So my research on that came to 90 to 120. A lot of that was done in the early 80s and 90s, right? Now the numbers are coming out higher. But most protein research on athletes is done on university-aged kids. And I'm convinced university-aged adults. And I'm convinced that most of them now know about protein. They're already eating more. So what research is finding out is you need a bit more. And I guarantee you in 10 years from now, if as a society we're all eating 150 grams of protein, like just as a daily intake, research will say, well, 200. And then if we get to 200, it's going to say 250 because it really is a non-issue because these spikes are just, they're the percent change that matters, I think, not maybe the absolute amount. Otherwise, we just all eat 800 grams of protein and never stop growing and end up looking like the Incredible Hulk. Straight. So there's obvious stops in there because I can eat 10 times the protein of someone. Like someone who eats 60, I could steak and protein shake my weight is 600. It would be horrible and I would be incredibly gassy, but I could do it. I am not going to have 10 times the muscle of that person. Right? That's what it breaks down to being non-linear like that. Whereas it seems to be most people can gain a noticeable amount of muscle in that kind of just a little bit more protein. So let's aim for that.
Yeah, and not all protein is created equal. I mean, you've got really some super, non-bioavailable protein shakes on the market that just kind of your body can't really do anything with them. It can't break them down to their constituent parts. Then you've got really high quality proteins like hemp protein, which from what I understand is incredibly bioavailable and has all the essential amino acids.
Never tried hemp. Is it good?
It's a little grassy, but yeah. I find that I actually, for me, it's interesting that you said, when you said 90 to 150, I was like, really? I top out around 60 or 70 grams of protein a day, and I'm a 6 foot, 175 pound male who works out 6 days a week. And that seems kind of on the low side, but I think since I base most of my protein on like super, like, from what I believe, bioavailable protein sources like hemp, that I don't need as much because my body's just able to use that.
I'm working with a grad student right now who's looking at that exactly because what we're thinking is, okay, if you're used to, let's say everybody eats 90 grams of protein, and then you go into a study and some people get to eat 120, but then the other people are put at a base level of 60. One group's going to gain and the other group's going to lose because of that abrupt change. But if you took a group of people who normally eat 90 grams of protein and over the course of 2 months slowly lower them down to 60, would you see any change? Or does their body just get used to using the protein that's been given to it? And that's why I think that someone like you, if you're used to 60, 65, it's not like you're losing muscle every day. Right?
Yeah,
So
I'm okay.
Exactly. So, and in fact, I would wonder if someone who's used to 60, then, once or twice a year, it's like, I'm going to try to gain some muscle, and you jump it up to 80 and then 100 and then stop, and then maybe slowly bring it back down. Would that be more anabolic because the percent change is bigger than someone who's used to eating 250 grams of protein every day and jumps to 300? And even though it's 50 more grams of protein, the percent change is smaller, right? So there's still lots of questions. I mean, I'll be honest. I almost refuse to discuss protein anymore because everybody wants to talk about how many. All scientists right now are doing the whole. I shouldn't say all. The majority are doing the whole X grams of protein per pound of body weight. And my thought there is, if the amount of protein you eat for muscle growth is dictated by the amount of lean body mass you have, why the hell are we talking about weight? I mean, you can't tell me here's 3 big gentlemen who are all 250 pounds of body weight, how much lean mass they have. Again, wildly different, right? Wildly different. And so for me to think that all 3 of those gentlemen need 250 grams of protein is just ridiculous. I mean, I would almost argue that protein based off of height makes more sense, because at least height is a better indicator of lean mass than body weight, right? So it just breaks down to, I don't understand. There's so many fundamental questions that we haven't answered. Is your protein intake dictated by your lean body mass? Yes or no? If yes, then why the hell are we talking about body weight? And if not, then what is it dictated by? Is it just 60 grams for everybody, regardless of your size? It's really weird. There's these fundamental questions that are kind of missing that then make discussing it really hard. So all I know is that, most people seem to do well with these normal amounts. Anybody who increases their protein from whatever number to an increase tend to see results they brag about online for the first couple of weeks, and then they disappear. Right. And I know people who eat 300, 400 grams of protein a day. And if you go on Instagram and you're like, wow, you look exactly the same now as you did in 2012. So why are you doing this? Right. Like, it's just one of the things where I'm like, again, right back down to, we just do food. You'll be all right. Right. Like, yeah.
It comes back to that Zen saying. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I've been reading, rereading a book called Thrive by a guy named Brendan Brazier. And,
yeah. Okay.
Have you heard of him, or?
I know Brendan. I know of Brendan, and I've heard of Thrive. Have not read it.
Oh, it's awesome. And he talks a lot about, nutritional stress, and how, eating oftentimes is probably one of the most taxing things the body does. And so his whole nutritional philosophy focuses on eating those foods that are the most easily assimilated by the body. And there's a bit in there about protein and how it's really just a bunch of amino acids that need to be sort of disassembled and then reassembled in the body for it to be used. And so the harder your body has to work to do that stuff, the less sort of energy you're going to have at the end of the day once everything is said and done.
I'm going to mess up the numbers, and I think it was a Facebook post by Dr. Stu Phillips out of Mac, but he was saying, like, I'm going to say 10% of the protein you eat becomes available to your muscle, and the majority of it's your gut, and then the second majority, is there such a thing? It goes to other processes, but such a minor amount goes to your muscle. And it kind of got me thinking too. I'm like, if you're eating so much protein that you're the guy who clears a 2,000 square foot gym, like just clears it because of your gas, like that can't be cool. That can't be good for your body. There is a reason, like that when you're like, oh my God, that smells so horrible, I want to puke. Like that's kind of an indication that something's not cool with you. Right. So that was just, again, I'm just going by really anecdotal kind of childlike common sense. But if it doubles you over in pain and you stink really bad, maybe it's not something you want to do.
Yeah. Yeah. At the end of the day, it's a journey of just listening to your body. Right.
Yeah. And it's ridiculous as people get so mad you saying that. It's so true. Right? Like
Yeah. Well, for me, at least, it was a long road of separating my ego from that voice inside that was like, Trevor, enough, enough, dude. Like, you don't need to look like this person. You don't need to eat like this person. You don't need to, stand up and fight for such and such. Just be you. And that was a long road. Then now I'm in my late 30s and I'm finally, I think, starting to live that a little more. But easier said than done. Real quickly before we let you go, Pilon's progressions. Can you give us a primer on your philosophy there?
Yeah, okay. So this is really fun. You have your weight workouts, and this is predominantly a weight workout philosophy, is you have these volume, which is how much work you do in a workout. You have frequency, or how often you work out. And you have intensity, or how hard, or typically how heavy it is you work out. And I just had such a hard time working with these numbers, being like, well, which one is it, and how can one be more important than the other, and how do you even disassociate them? This is probably wrong, because if the answer is just more volume makes you bigger, then you're like, okay, well then I'm just going to go for a walk and my legs should be, my calves should be massive. Right. You're like, well, no, because it has to be past a certain intensity. I'm like, well, then it can't be a law if you've got caveats. So is it intensity? Can I just do 1 rep maxes of bench every so often, and then I grow? And they're like, no, because it needs to be some volume. I'm like, oh my God, this is really frustrating, guys. I'm like, well, is it just frequency? Can I do it every day? Like, no, because there has to be some intensity involved. I'm like, okay, let's stop and move back. And what I did was I looked at the equations you would use to predict your 1 rep max on any exercise. So your estimated 1 rep max. And then I plugged every possible weight and rep range I could think of into just giant algorithm, right? Just giant spreadsheet. So literally, one side is reps. I think I did like 5 through 14, something like that. I forget. There was a reason, 5 through 15. And then weights from like 0 all the way up to like 700 pounds. And then I did the estimated 1 rep calculation, and I got your E1RM. And it was basically this snake-like thing of different weights and reps that worked at an estimated 1 rep max. I'm going to grab it. It's like a 2-second walk to my gym. Okay. So what you end up with is just variable weights and reps, but a very slow-moving estimated 1 rep max. So the page I just took down, I actually taped them up on my wall in the gym, is an estimated 1 rep max starting at 144 pounds. So you would do, to get that, 120 pounds for 6 reps. Let's say this is squat. Well, then your next set, you want to do a slightly higher estimated 1 rep max. In this case, 145.6 pounds. That's 115 pounds, so a lower weight on the bar, but for 8 reps.
Ah, I see. Interesting.
So, sometimes the reps are going down. So reps on this page, the reps go, a set of 6, a set of 8, a set of 10, a set of 12, a set of 7, a set of 9, a set of 6. So the reps are all over the place. Sometimes they drop down to 5, sometimes they're up to 14. And the weight does the same thing. Some days you're going in the gym and you're doing a bunch of sets. You might be doing a set of 13 with 105 pounds. Then your very next set would be a set of 8 at 120 pounds. But the 1 rep max estimation is always creeping up slowly. So over the course of weeks, the amount of weight and the amount of reps you're using just sort of always equal to a higher effort, a higher estimated 1 rep max, a higher ability to do more in that measurement. And it was a way for me to figure it all out. It's like, there's my progression. That's all I really care about. If my estimated 1 rep max is going up, eventually my weight that I'm using will just, as on average, go up. And the reps, there's going to be low rep days and high rep days, but the load will eventually just also increase. So everything kind of plays in that way where, it might be scary to go from 110 pounds for 12 reps and then realize, holy crap, my next set is 125 pounds for 7 reps. Even though that's a lot less reps, man, that sounds like a lot more weight. But then you look over at the estimated 1 rep max, and 110 for 12 is 154. 125 for 7 is 154.16. Oh, okay, hold on. I've got, basically 0.16 in me. I can do this. And so it makes it a bit easier. And so what I've been doing is literally I've got this chart up on my wall, the chart that's in Pilon's progressions. When I do a set, I just cross it off. And then I do the next set and I cross it off. And I only do about 2 or 3 in a workout. I don't want to increase my 1 rep max by more than like a pound and a half in a workout. And then the next week, I just start off with the next one. And so over the course of almost a year now, I've worked my way down through considerable pages, and it always seems to work out. You get stuck every once in a while. And then, you play around with maybe the other exercises you're doing that aren't progressions, that are just kind of you getting some work in or practicing something. But in general, for almost every lift I've done, it just sort of keeps on trucking. And the amount of, oh my God, I can't believe I just said keeps on trucking, but it just keeps on progressing, right? And then, it seems, again, mundane and boring until like 6 months later when you're sitting there going like, oh, I've actually averaged increasing this lift, a bit more than almost 2 pounds a week. Maybe it was like 1.25 pounds. But over the course of a year, I've added 60 pounds on to a squat. And,
wow.
and someone who's been squatting for a long time and has always sucked at squatting, that's pretty good. Right. So it was just a way for me to, I needed a way to be able to measure effort, and not some sort of like, well, that was a 7 out of 10 effort, but literally be like, that was an estimated 1 rep max of 140. Like I should be able to slap 140 pounds on the bar and get it. Right. So it was a way for me to, standardize effort and show constant improvement, but make the constant improvement small enough I could do it for long periods of time. And that's so Pilon progressions is an explanation of that math, the reasoning behind it, and then it's just a giant volume of charts that you can apply to any lift you're trying to do. It's typically better for barbell type stuff. I haven't quite perfected it for like dumbbells, but on any major barbell type lift, so it has really, really worked out. I mean, it's the one thing I've done that I've been able to last for almost a year and 3 months now on, and then still be progressing.
That's awesome. That's really intrinsically motivating. And you could conceivably just take these charts to the gym and set up right by a bench press and right by a squat rack and maybe a chin-up bar or something, and then just fill in the blanks for how long would you say you invest in this on a weekly basis? How many hours?
Right now I'm a 3 times a week, maybe 45 minutes. And that's I'm a big rest guy. I like to kind of sit around doing nothing. So it's not a lot of work, but my view is if I'm consistently improving within a variety of rep ranges, I'm getting strong at 6 reps, I'm getting strong at 8 reps, and I'm getting strong at 12 reps, then I must be doing something right.
I feel like your work really covers all the bases. You've got like the mindsets, you've got like the diet, you've got the protein, you've got the, I know you don't like this word, but the holistic sort of approach to air quality. You've got the workout. I mean, it's really a pretty comprehensive body of work you've built. And what I like about it is that it's all so simple and there's no crazy supplement that I need to buy or become dependent on. I'm so over the supplement thing, man. I'm just convinced that it's mostly a racket, to be honest.
Well, it's exactly what it was named. They're supposed to be supplemental, right?
Right,
So
right.
don't get enough protein. Here's a protein shake, right? So they're supplements. They're not magics, right? So
Yeah.
It just needs to be simple enough that I can understand it. And that's why they're the way they are. I go really, really deep, and I pull back, and I'm like, do I actually understand what's going on? And if so, how would I explain it to a room full of people? And that's how books come out.
Well, that's such a gift. That's such a gift to have, to be able to go deep and do the research and then go like, okay, like how do I condense this for like people who just don't have the interest or the time or the energy or the capacity, mental capacity to, stomach all this? How can I present this to them? And you do that so beautifully. I mean, you've got these great books that are just so chock full of like some of the most cutting edge research I've ever seen. And then you can sum it up in a sentence or two.
Yeah, that's typically the goal, right? It's like if I could make it so that a one-pager would suffice to give you the actual goal of it all, and then explain it, then open it up and give you cool metaphors and analogies and explanation of why that's the goal. And that's what I'm always trying to hit. But I really appreciate the fact you noticed that.
Yeah, no, I've when I read Eat Stop Eat, that was like one of the first things I noticed. I was like, I love the science. This is great. I know most of my friends could care less about this. They just want to know what to do. Like, what are the sort of, quote unquote rules? And I was like, I could tell them in a sentence or two, and they could have great results as well. And so it's really just about the mind game, and you tackle so much of that. And I can't say enough good things about your work, Brad. And I'm really grateful that you took the time, especially this extra time, to chat with us today.
Oh, no worries, man. It was a lot of fun.
Okay, 2 final questions before I let you go, Brad. The first one, we ask this of all our guests, and we always get really fascinating responses. So the first question is, did this path of nutrition and sports science, research, writing, sharing. Did this choose you, or did you choose it?
Wow, that's an awesome question. It chose me. So up until we do grade high school in Canada, grade 9, 10, 11, 12. We used to be OAC. So I don't know what sophomore, I don't know how it breaks down. But so by up until almost my last year of high school, I was going to go into the arts. I was going to go into photography, possibly graphic design. That's what I like. I was still enthralled with the human body, but I liked that creative aspect of it. This was longer ago than I'd cared to admit. So I had to sit down with my parents, and I was like, hey, if I'm going to graphic arts, I need a computer. And this is back when like not everybody had a computer. Again, I feel old now, right? So, but and my parents were like, well, then, you need to find $2,000 for the Atari or Commodore 64. You need to. And I'm like, well, I don't have that. And back in the day, that wasn't the amount of money you'd make in a summer job or anything. So I was like, oh, that sucks. But I know the future of, I liked actually medical illustration is what I wanted to go into by that time. I'm like, I know that if I don't know how to do this on the computer, I'll be far behind. And so I went from that, and my fascination with the human body and nutrition, et cetera, just happenstancely in my final year of high school, taking biology and OEC, I guess, final year, anatomy was a separate course, kind of like in the phys ed realm. And I just excelled in those courses. And it was really interesting because this is kind of ridiculous, but it was those two plus my art marks that got me in the university into my nutrition program. Like if it wasn't for, painting, photography, and those two classes, I don't know if I would have even gotten in. So it was really interesting that, this by happenstance, I didn't get into one area, but in not getting in, I sort of refocused on the other area, but it's always been an interest. I mean, drawing was always, you drew superheroes, and to draw a superhero properly, you need to know the ratios of a superhero, right? And then to draw the ratios of a superhero properly, you need to know where the muscles went and how big they were supposed to be. And the difference between, drawing Spider-Man versus drawing the Hulk are two different things, right? So you get interested in that. And then, you combine that with sort of a base understanding of biology and having your little mind perk up whenever the word protein was mentioned. And you're like, oh, okay, this all sort of fits together, right? It's the, I'd never make as a sculptor, so I went into, working out instead.
That's a trip. I had the same experience when I was in grade school. I would draw a lot of superheroes and muscle men, and a lot of my friends would ask me, they'd say, how do you, draw so well? And I'd always say, like I was on my high horse. I would always just say, well, you got to think about the way the human body works. You got to think about how it's put together. And I was really fascinated with that. And I think that really informed my sort of hobby in learning about, health and fitness. I think that's a trip that you had the same sort of.
Oh, yeah. Well, and outside of the Hulk, I mean, again, based on our age, most of these superhero movies, going back to like the old school Sylvester Stallone or the Jean-Claude Van Damme, they had a training montage. So you knew how they got superhero body. Even, Captain America had the drugs, but it was still training montage-ish, right? So you knew that was the step one, small, skinny, step three, muscular, solve your problems, but you had a vague idea what step two was. And that was the intriguing black box that really kind of dives a lot of us into it, I think.
Yeah, man, that's a trip. Last question for you before we let you go. If you could impart one nugget of wisdom or knowledge or just something to pass along to somebody who's maybe walking this journey alongside you or maybe behind you, what would that nugget of wisdom be?
Okay, so I'm going to go old man dad on you here.
Bring it.
And I'm going to kind of lay it out like this, is unless you are an actor is a great example, an actor who requires it for a role. If you are a professional fitness model, or if you're like me and are somehow making money off of health and fitness, if you're spending more than, let's say, 4 hours a week in the gym, you are wasting time you could be spending with friends, family, other interests, other career choices, etc. So while it is extremely interesting and it is an amazing hobby, it is addictive, and it is ego-driven narcissism a lot of the time. And you need to realize you can get really, really good results training 3 times a week for an hour. You can get exceptional results with more, but you can get really, really good results with just that amount of time. So you have to always step back and kind of think about why you're doing this, right? So it's just like any other craft, is the amount of time you spend into it has to be used efficiently. And always remember, time you are investing into it is time you could have been investing in other things that may last longer than your body. So I love working out. Like, it's something I'm in my home office and I'm staring at my gym in the basement, and it takes up a considerable portion of the basement, despite everybody's misgivings about it, right? Like, it's part of who I am. But I do have to realize that because it is in my basement, I could start a workout now and I could finish it after the kids go to bed, right? But instead of that, I did my workout today, but on any other day, I would be done by 2:45 and I would pick the kids up from school and I would hang out with them until they go to bed. And so it's just remembering that, like, there are people who need to have amazing bodies for their job or for their career. And it's important to stay healthy, and it's important to like the body you're in. But if you can get 90% of the results that are absolutely possible with your specific body, right? So, if you have your top level superhero body, it's attainable for you. If you can get 90% of the way there, to the point where, you make the other moms and dads or people in your groups jealous by your look, then maybe that extra 10% isn't worth the other 8 hours of not just time in the gym, but mind space it's going to take, right? And then if your entire life revolves around not only being in the gym, but then when you're home working out complex math problems of how many sets and reps you should do tomorrow, that is time that could be spent maybe doing other stuff. So embrace it and love it, but don't let it consume you.
I love that. It's like the 80-20 rule, right? It's like focus on that 20% that's going to get you 80% of your results, and just invest the rest in the stuff that's really lasting. I love that. That's amazing. So if anybody can, if they want to find out more about you, I know you're on the social medias. Yeah. I think it's just Brad Pilon, right?
I'm ego-driven narcissist. So it's everywhere. It could be Brad Pilon. It is Brad Pilon. So my blog is bradpilon.com. My Twitter is @BradPilon. My Instagram is Brad Pilon. So you can pretty much find me by typing in either Eat Stop Eat or Brad Pilon in anything, and I'm the guy who pops up.
Awesome. Yeah, your blog is great, and I love getting your newsletter. There is some promotional content that you send out, but it's always like really interesting stuff.
I try to make it clear. So if it says promotional, then it's a promotion, right? And if it doesn't say that, it's me writing.
Yeah. But the stuff that you do share that is promotional is always of value. It's always relevant. It's always
stuff I find interesting, generally.
Yeah, totally. So really looking forward to getting this out to the world, to getting more people on board with a happier, healthier relationship to food and fitness, and in a very simple, approachable way. Brad, thank you again so much. This was really awesome, man. Really appreciate it.
Oh, no, lots of fun, man. Thanks for having me.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Bookends. Hope you enjoyed the entire series with Mr. Pilon. I know I did. I was telling Trevor before we started recording today that he's the kind of person, the kind of episode, the kind of interview where I just feel like I want to hang out with him. I just want to go to Canada and just be like, hey, what's up, Brad? Let's chill. Let's, not eat some food together. And let's fast together. No, he just seems so cool. So I really appreciate him coming on the show, spending so much time with us, and lending his knowledge and his expertise. And what a cool interview for an acting podcast. How about them apples? We had that on our acting podcast. That's pretty amazing. Any final debrief or thoughts that you want to add here, Trevor?
The big takeaway for me, and this is a journey that I've been on, and Brad's work really kickstarted it for me, is that it's just food. It is just food. We have a lot of conversations in this industry about body image and attractiveness and marketability and branding and all these things that relate directly to by extension, our relationship with the food we eat. And it can be a really miserable relationship that we build for ourselves when it comes to the sort of dichotomy of how do I make myself the most, marketable, quote unquote, marketable version of myself, but still live a rich, full life in which I am a human being that just gains weight, that loses weight, that enjoys food, that enjoys tradition, enjoys people. How do we do that? And so, whether fasting is a solution for you or not, I hope that you take away, and I'm speaking to our listeners, not to you, AJ, well, to you as well, but I hope that you take away that it's just food. It's just food, and it's meant to be enjoyed, and it comes back to what Michael Pollan has written that just simplifies everything. Eat food, mostly vegetables, not too much.
Not too much.
And I know that's easier said than done, but if you find from time to time that you have a moment of awareness where you just go, I need to not eat as much, maybe a day or two of intermittent fasting that week can help, and maybe Brad's work can help inform how to do that effectively. And then hopefully that will also help restore a healthy relationship with food and with your body, and how that all works in this industry, which is so image centric sometimes. So that would be my big sort of summary of it. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and it is yours for free to listen to whenever you like. So feel free to revisit it and check out Brad's work. Eat Stop Eat is a great book. How Much Protein is awesome. I haven't read Good Belly, Bad Belly, but I have read some more on gut health and some of the research that's going on around our microbiome, and that's really fascinating stuff. So his work covers the gamut, man. Check it out.
And speaking of gut health, what is your pick of the week?
My pick of the week is episode 353 of the Rich Roll podcast, which we have name-checked a few times in this episode now. And this specific episode is with a guy named Zach Bush. He's a medical doctor, and he talks about GMOs, glyphosate, and healing your gut. And this is a deep dive that a lot of this was over my head when I listened to it, but it really opened my eyes to the toxins on our food and how it affects us long term. And it definitely convinced me to only buy organic. A lot of people say, oh, it's organic, non-organic is fine. If you can afford organic, that's all good. But what they're discovering many, many years down the line now from the introduction of some of these chemicals is that they are definitely bioaccumulating in the body and definitely causing issues, not only in the people that consume them, but in their offspring, in their children. And so the rise in autism specifically can be directly linked to the rise in the use of some of these chemicals, specifically stuff from, Monsanto and these other food giants that have engineered our food to withstand, massive dousing of chemical pesticides and things like that. So this conversation, again, is a deep dive into that kind of thing, as well as, how all this stuff affects our gut, which is just this incredible diversity of bacteria that informs everything from our mood to our cravings to how our body interacts with the food we eat, like how those nutrients get shuttled around. It's all about the gut bacteria. So weight gain, weight loss, a lot of that stuff is responsible. A lot of that stuff is informed, I should say, by the bacteria that we feed in our gut, and that goes directly into our diet. And so we really can reprogram ourselves by feeding the good bacteria and starving the bad bacteria in our gut with our diet. So it's really fascinating stuff. My favorite interview on his podcast, which is saying a lot because he's got a great podcast. So check it out. Episode 353 of the Rich Roll podcast with Zach Bush. Link to that is on in the show notes of our website for this episode.
And Trevor was nice enough, loving enough to think of me while listening to this podcast and sent me a couple of episodes recently. One with that I mentioned earlier with this guy by the name of Jared Blumenthal, who not only worked for the EPA, but when he stopped working for the EPA, he actually went and hiked the PCT, Pacific Crest Trail, which stretches from the United States border with Mexico and Canada. It's 2,600-ish miles. And it's something I've been thinking about a lot lately, and something that I definitely want to do. And I was inspired to reconnect with my love of nature last year after a camping trip with Trevor. and learning about a couple of these insane rock climbers, including a gentleman by the name of Alex Honnold, who is the first and only person to free solo, meaning without any safety equipment, ropes, harnesses, anything, the face of El Capitan in Yosemite Valley. Alex was on Rich Roll's podcast, and he talked about a foundation that he has started to raise awareness, money, and work, action around solar energy, especially and specifically in areas that are poverty-stricken, don't have a lot of technology, basically in the middle of nowhere, especially in Africa and African countries, so Ethiopia, Angola, etc. That my pick of the week is this new foundation that he started a few years ago, called HonnoldFoundation.org. He also has a film coming out later this year, which I'm sure if we're still on the air will be another pick of the week, about his climb of El Capitan. And I have been thinking a lot about this journey of going on a hike on the PCT and not wanting it to be selfish, not wanting it to be like a lot of solitude or a singular thing that I'm just doing and that's it. I want it to have some kind of meaning. And so what I was inspired to after listening to this episode, and I don't know what this is going to look like, and I haven't yet reached out to them, but they do have a contact form on their website, is I've been thinking a lot about, hiking sort of in the name of an organization. And I think this is going to be it, because it was Alex who his climb that sort of inspired me to, again, get back into nature and start this whole crazy trip I'm currently on with backcountry backpacking. And so what more fitting and poetic way to sort of bring it full circle than to, do the PCT in the name of the Honnold Foundation and see if there's a way that I can raise awareness and money in the way that you would if you were doing like one of those walkathons in, elementary school. I remember we used to do those, like if you get people to sort of sign up and pledge a certain amount of money for every mile that you walked or whatever it was, or every step that you took, like a penny for every step that you took or something like that. So 2,600 plus miles, maybe I could actually make a difference and not feel so, I don't know what the word is. Selfish doesn't feel like the right word, but not feel like it's so singular in that pursuit of completing something like as audacious as the PCT. So if you go and check out their website, it's very simple, but it's great. They have a section on like what they're up to in the news, what they're about, and then a very simple sort of take action where you can donate, become a partner, sign up for their newsletter, etc. So that is my pick of the week.
Awesome. And that's at HonnoldFoundation.org, HONNOLD Foundation.org. That is so cool. AJ, are you thinking of doing the PCT solo, or would you have somebody join you?
You kind of have to do it solo. Anyone who has gone on one of these giant through hikes with someone ends up, you don't always hike with them. Even if you're sharing shelter, meaning one of you has a tent and the other one does not, and you sleep in the same tent, like if it's a couple or a best friend or something like that, you end up hiking separately a lot and then just sort of catching up when you get to a particular place, just because, people have different paces and styles and mileage that they want to cover in a particular day, things like that. So yeah, it would be solo. I mean, you meet people on the trail and you make connections, you make friends, etc. But it would be by its very nature a solo expedition.
Yeah. Sarah Beth Goer, longtime listener, sent me a book called Wild by Cheryl Strayed. They made a movie out of it with Reese Witherspoon. And I read that, and that's a story about this woman who hikes the PCT, and I've been meaning to give it to you, AJ. But it does seem like the kind of thing that would be impossible to do with another person for the entirety of it. Like here and there, you link up with people, but for the most part, it's got to be a solo thing.
Yeah.
And that's a long commitment. I mean, that's several months of walking.
It's at least 4. It's, on average, people finish it between 4 and 6 months. Because 2,600 miles, if you do a marathon, as Jared says on Rich's podcast, if you do, a marathon's worth of travel a day, that's still 100 days.
Wow. Epic. Well, keep us posted on that. And that's so cool that that you would contribute a lot of this to the Hunold Foundation. Love what they're doing over there at the Hunold Foundation, by the way. The solar initiatives are great. So that is episode 353 of the Rich Roll Podcast with Zach Bush on GMOs, glyphosate, and healing the gut, as well as the Hunold Foundation. Links to both of those are on our website, along with everything else we talked about in this episode. So if you'd like to take a deeper dive into some things that were discussed in episode 308 of Inside Acting, be sure to hit up our website, insideacting.net. Anything else before we get out of here?
No, sir.
All right, guys. Today's episode was produced and hosted by me, Trevor Algott, and AJ Meyer. Team IAP also includes Jen Levin and Grace Gordon.
Visit us online at insideacting.net to sign up for our weekly email dispatch and listen to all of our episodes. We're on social media, of course, and pretty much everywhere you get your podcasts.
You can directly support Inside Acting with either a one-time financial contribution or an ongoing monthly contribution. Just visit us at insideacting.net to learn more and help us keep this thing online for the foreseeable future.
And that is it for episode 308. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next week, and until then, boogie on.